In this lesson, we are going to learn about the 3 different English colonies that settled in America and the differences in the economies and societies in those colonies. There are 3 distinct groups of colonies, which include those in the northern region that are called the New England colonies, those that were kind of in the middle from north to south, which included Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, and Delaware, which were called the Middle colonies, and the colony group that South Carolina was a member of, which included Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Maryland, which is called the Southern colonies. These colonies would differ in their outlook on religious freedom, their economies and how they make money, and also some other societal differences. Now, the first group of colonies that we're going to learn a little bit about, of course we're going to revisit it later, are the Southern colonies. And the Southern colonies began with Virginia. Virginia was the first of the Southern colonies. And of course, the first colony or first settlement in Virginia was what colony? Yes, Jamestown. This is Virginia today, and Virginia would be the first English colony that would be successful. Virginia started when the English settled right here at the mouth of this river and founded the city of Jamestown. Now, Jamestown was founded by a company, a group of investors that were called the London Company. The London Company was a group of investors who pooled their money and financed an expedition to the New World with the hope of making more money. Because whenever someone invests, it is to hopefully take an investment of money and make more money. Because there was more than one investor and each held shares of stock, it was called a joint stock company. The joint stock company, the group of investors that founded Jamestown, was called the London Company. Now, as we've already learned, or it's been mentioned, the Jamestown colony was not immediately successful. In fact, the original explorers or adventurers brought tests for gold rather than the supplies to build a successful settlement. And they starved after just a few months at the settlement. The reason is they went out and looked for gold and did not try to plant any crops or grow any livestock for meat. There was additional factors such as they angered the Native Americans in the area, and the Native Americans had no interest in helping them survive either. However, as it was already mentioned, even though they starved, on later missions over to the Jamestown colony, which, when the English chose to resupply Jamestown, the original investors sent another ship over to figure out what happened. Eventually, they figured out a way to make money and therefore continue to support their colony, and that was to grow what cash crop? Yes, tobacco. Tobacco would save Jamestown. Let's have a look at the PowerPoint slides. So Jamestown was founded in 1607, so it's over 400 years old, and it was the first permanent English settlement in the New World. It's in Virginia, and Jamestown was created through a joint stock company. A joint stock company, as we said, is a group of investors who invest money with the hope of making more money, but they all hold shares in the company, like partnerships, except it's more than two. The settlers endured several years of starvation, and many died. As was mentioned already before, there is a rumor that perhaps they had to revert to cannibalism. However, there was further missions and supply ships that were sent to Jamestown by the Joint Stock Company, and eventually they started to grow tobacco in Jamestown, which would become the #1 cash crop grown in Virginia, and it would save Jamestown and create a stronghold of English settlement on the east coast of the United States. Here's a map of where the Jamestown colony is. We do not talk much about the lost colony of Roanoke Island, which was a past attempt before Jamestown to establish a colony, and all the settlers were never heard from again. Here's the fort at Jamestown, which shows how the fort was shaped. You could call this a what, similar to what the Cherokee had, a large fence made up of trees. Yes, you could call it a palisade. You can see that Native Americans were probably seen as a threat by the arrow and the war club here. Here's another picture of the fort. It shows the dock, having access to a dock so ships could come in safely and stay the night as well as unload their cargo would be something that was necessary for the establishment of a successful settlement. Once it was discovered that Jamestown and the soil around it could grow tobacco, the London Company sought to increase the amount of settlers there. And the way in which they chose to increase the amount of settlers there was by instituting a policy that was known as the Headright Method. And the Headright Method was a policy in which the London Company granted free land for those who could pay their way to the Americas. This is why I'm drawing a head, and we'll give him a smiley face. So the Headright Method was instituted to attract people to Jamestown. Now, the whole reason that the London Company wanted to attract people to Jamestown was so those people could grow tobacco and of course share a portion of the profits with the London Company, because even though the land was initially free, the London Company was probably going to charge a yearly rent or demand a portion of the profits that those who were growing tobacco on their land were going to make. So the Headright method would cause the expansion of tobacco growing in Virginia. So as a result of the Headright method, tobacco growing would become very prevalent in Virginia. Tobacco grows from the Headright method. So the Headright method, free land for coming to America, would cause tobacco growing to increase in Virginia and an increase in the number of tobacco farms. However, it would not, Virginia would become the model of the Southern agriculturally based society with large plantations. And in large part, this was because of the Headright method and the benefits that it provided to the early people that came over here. The earliest people that come over here would start to own very large plantations. And the reason is because the Headright method would give them free land. So I'm going to use just an example, and I'm going to put student because, let's use Sally. I have no Sallys. Sally came over here with the Headright method. She was able to pay her passage over here and was granted land for coming to America by the London Company. Now, the London Company expects her to grow tobacco and share this with the profits with them. So they're going to make money in the deal after all. However, what happens is after a few years, Sally starts to make a lot of money, and she doesn't really know what to do with it. She has a lot of money, but she's getting tired of working a little bit and wants some help. So what Sally does is she writes to her friend over in England and suggests to that friend that they come over. Now, her friend's name is Bill. Bill is living in dreary old London, and he hates his life in the city, which is overcrowded and in some ways disease infested. And Bill wants to come over and join Sally. And Sally says, "Hey, Bill, don't you worry. I'll pay your passage over here, and you could work for me." Well, what Sally isn't telling Bill is that by bringing Bill over here, she is entitled to another section of land. So when she brings Bill over here, she doubles her land, and she gets a worker. Now, this worker that she brings over Bill, of course, Sally says, "Bill, I know you don't have any money. I'm going to bring you over here, and you can work off your debt to me. Now, I'm going to give you a place to live, which is better than the crowded city of London you live in. And all you have to do is work for me, and you can live there for free. And you'll get out of the city, come to the new colony of Virginia, and raise tobacco. However, what Sally's not telling Bill is that she's getting land for him going over here as well as a worker. Now, this system of paying for the passage of others from England to the Americas, or also from another country, but expecting them to work it off, is known as the system of indenture. And those that come over are called an indentured servant. Now, Bill, who is coming over here, is an indentured servant because there's a contract and he has to sign it, probably through a lawyer, some type of correspondence between between Virginia and England. And when he comes over here, Bill has agreed to work for like 5 years. Now, Sally achieves two things by this indentured servant deal. One is she received more land. Two, she received labor for the land. Now, Sally continues to make money and continues to bring others over. For every one she brings over, her land holdings increase, as well as her workforce. So, it's not hard to figure. Now, the bad part of the deal is that when Bill works over his 5 years of indentured servitude, he doesn't have any land unless Sally would be nice enough to give him some, which wasn't usually the case because it really wasn't usually their friends. It was people that were volunteering to sign up. So, the indentured servant method would lead to the creation of large plantations. And those that owned the large plantations were the ones that came over early enough and could afford to come over by their own money to get the free land in the first place, which enabled them to start the system of being able to have money to bring indentured servants over. Sometimes maybe someone was rather wealthy in England, and they would organize the transfer of indentured servants to the New World, and they would start out with 4 times the land that they would have if they came alone. So, indentured servants would be a feature of the Virginia colony. Now, Virginia would grow in population, and as it grew, it needed a way to govern itself. The king would have liked to have had direct contact with Virginia and govern it directly. If he did, he may have appointed a governor. However, the Virginia colony very much resembled a part of the English government. Where England has Parliament, Virginia would have a democratic representative assembly, which would consist of those who were in Virginia, and this was called the House of Burgesses. So the democratic government in Virginia was called the House of Burgesses. I'm going to show this to you in just a few moments. The House of Burgesses. So this is one of the places where the idea of self-government started to arise. The English king and Parliament were unable to participate in the government of the English colonies, so they had to govern themselves. And as we learned in the last lesson, in the English colonies, there was a prevalent feeling of self-government. And the House of Burgesses was the democratic government in Virginia, or the entity which would be the self-government of that colony. Now, Virginia would become the model for the southern colonies. The southern colonies would be ones that exhibited large plantations like Sally's. Most of the southern colonies, South Carolina included, would use the headright method, and for all those that came over here, free land would be granted. And in South Carolina, this would include for slaves that those who bought could bring over. So, Virginia would become the southern colony model, and Virginia was founded for the purpose of profit. This was an English colony that was founded for the purpose of profit. Colonies that were founded for the purpose of profit were called proprietary colonies. The southern colonies, South Carolina included, would be one of proprietary colonies. They were English colonies, but they were not necessarily for the purpose of religious freedom. They had owners, and the owners wanted to make profit off of them. So, Virginia and the rest of the southern colonies were proprietary colonies for the purpose of profit. Once again, let's put a 1 here because Virginia was the first English colony in the New World as well. Virginia was the first English colony in the New World, and of course we know what colony was the first successful, or what city was the first successful settlement in South Carolina. Yes, Charleston. Let's look at the PowerPoint here and go over some things that have already been covered. The London Company established the headright method, gave land to anyone who paid their passage or paid the passage of others to the New World or the Virginia colony. The headright method, due to the fact that was described, created large tobacco plantations. These tobacco plantations, of course, which were an imposition on the Native American land, caused conflict over the land with the natives. Tobacco growers enlarged their land holdings through the headright method, just like I described for Sally, and secured workers through indentured servants. However, by the end of the 1600s, a more reliable source of labor was introduced. The new workforce was African slaves. The reason was people quit signing up for the terms of indenture because they realized it was not a good deal to be an indentured servant. Now, the London Company once again established the House of Burgesses so the settlers could have a voice in the governance of the colony. It was not completely democratic, but was keeping with the English political tradition since the Magna Carta, and was somewhat representative of Parliament in England. Jamestown grew into the colony of Virginia and established the pattern for the southern colonies, or profit-making colonies. Here's a picture of the House of Burgesses, the interior, men making decisions about their government. Here's the actual picture of the House of Burgesses and where they met to govern Virginia, the Democratic government in Virginia. And that's all for this lesson. Tomorrow we're going to learn some about the New England colonies and perhaps the Middle. Until then, thank you for listening. I hope you did well.